we'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country, respect. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Cengage Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And now we can actually get into the event. I've been told Kristy needs no introduction, but you all know, you all think she's fabulous and that's why you're all here. So I'll hand over to Kristy now.
Jess, that was just me that told you I needed no introduction, really. That's the perfect introduction for me this evening. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And I'm hoping to, does it feel like a bizarre time to start thinking about next year? I always feel like in the life of a school, you're talking about next year's term dates and next year's resources and next year's students that are coming. But I think the time is quite timely because although we are wrapping up our Unit 3 material and Unit 1 material in our classes at the moment, I don't know about you, but it's also the time where I sit there with whatever work I'm doing and say, right, does this need any additions or changes to it to lock it away for next year? So it might seem early to talk about 2023, but I actually think it's probably the most useful time because as you pack those resources away and move on to the next unit, hopefully some of the things that I talk about tonight will help you to work out what do I actually need to modify in any of my resources now, and then future you will thank you this time next year when you've already done the work. So my objective tonight really is to talk about the research methods section of the course and also, I guess, the design of the research methods workbook, which many years ago, I think was one of the things that I developed as a classroom resource myself because I was really torn about how to teach this part of the course. I think for a number of reasons. One, student engagement. Two, what if students have done Unit 1 and then they come into you in Unit 3, have they already been taught this or not? And how do I cater for that? 3, the other problem, they haven't done 1, 2, but the rest of my class kind of has an idea. What do I do with that? But also I think what we've seen in especially the last 4 years is that we are now seeing a quarter of the marks of the exam dedicated to this content. So it does actually need to be treated differently than anything else you do. So this resource, if you have used it in the past, there are a lot of the features that you'll be familiar with, but it has been adapted to the new study design, which means that you can put hopefully your faith and trust in the research and the work that myself and the team have done, and know that if you're using this workbook, then we have covered off everything we need to. Obviously in the absence of any of those really weak curly questions that come out of anywhere, and then we all kind of gather together as teachers anyway to figure out what's going on. So tonight, let me talk you through this workbook, how it could be used, some of those changes, and also very happy if you do want to use the Q&A tonight, I will feed that in. I have started to develop resources across the scope of Unit 3 and 4 only. I can't help, I'm afraid, with too many 1, 2 specific questions apart from research. But if there are other things as we go through tonight, I'd love to be able to share with you anything that I have learned too. All right, so let's get started. So firstly, this workbook, as I said, if you have used it before, is structured in a very similar way. It really does a few things. If you started to look at that first course design, if you want to just flick back for me again, Jess, sorry, I do talk fast, but not quite that fast tonight. If you've started to look through the study design, one of the things that remains complex in this area of the course is that it's listed as key science skills and also listed as an outcome. So we're kind of juggling these two areas of the course. The key science skills obviously pertain to units 1 to 4. So what do I do as a teacher with that information? So the workbook really works, firstly, to break down every key science skill. So everything that's listed as a skill is represented in this workbook. So there's no distinction between Unit 1 and Unit 4. Instead, we use it as an umbrella to say you will need to have certain skills to be able to not just survive the exam, but be able to show your proficiency in regards to other areas as well. So this breaks down every skill and teaches the skill independently. You could actually just do what actually my year 11 psychology teacher did many, many, many years ago, and just, shut your eyes and put your feet on the table, and away you go. It probably wasn't quite that bad. That's just my memory of it. So this has content and the skill development together. It also involves scenario-based questions and scenarios relating to the real world. And gosh, I enjoyed writing this book at the time of conversation around how opinion polls shape changes, around how experimentation must have happened with vaccine efficiency. Writing about research methods after the last 2 years we've had. I've done it sensitively, I hope. But it's so interesting how more savvy our students are going to be in this research space, because they have been bombarded with messages, with data, with statistics, with assumptions. Even the section where we talk, the new study design has data modeling. And I was a bit like, oh, that's a weird concept. Then I went, wait a minute, isn't that what we were doing the whole time in working out whether we had mask mandates or whether we were locking down? We were using assumptions from data modeling. So the scenario work in this book really will pick up on students' real life experiences over the last 2 years. Hopefully it doesn't cause them any trauma. Lucky we're in Victoria and we knew it the best, huh? And the last thing I think that we'll see throughout this workbook is that we do link it to both areas of the study design. So sometimes they are, I guess I've given them weighting depending on their importance or difficulty. There are so many things listed that it could take all of us all year to cover everything in the necessary detail. So weighting within the books, what are those links that feature heavily in the study design, and what are those throwaway lines that could be brought to life with scenario work as well. Thank you, Jess. So what are some of the key changes? Pencils ready, everybody. Firstly, if you're one of those talented teachers that teachers across different specialties, you may already be working in another science subject where you can see now there is alignment and consistency across the sciences. So this is one of the things that is really helping our students. One of the things we find as VCE teachers, especially when legal studies requires them to interpret a described question in one way and we determine it a different way, we know that that can really be confusing for students. So lovely to get some consistency. I guess what we don't know yet is how will that marking application happen in terms of consistency? Are our preferred definitions of hypotheses and variables and error and bias, how are they seen consistently across those sciences? So I think it's a really good thing for all of us to have that open lens on in working more broadly with our science teams. Yes, there's alignment, and so we'll see some changes to the wording we're used to, but do we necessarily know that alignment's in application? One of the things I think that's really noticeable in this study design as well, it's really tapping into the thinkers in our classroom. And isn't that nice for a VCE course to not be about producer definition, but really about the thinking that goes around these themes. So there's a really strong sense of looking at the idea of what is the impact of data, how much can we value data, and how much can we use it to replicate in different environments. There's a big emphasis on which source have we drawn data from, and also who does that data impact in many different levels, which I'll talk a little bit about later. One of the things that the dot point mentions, it really drills down into things that you would see in your own school environment. So it looks at things like OH&S risks. It looks at things like safety data sheets. So we can really see those remnants of chemistry coming in. And I think for us as psychology teachers, what we need to do is say, all right, where would that apply in our context? Where is it in anything that we were doing, even something as simple, I haven't done a brain dissection in so many years, but, even looking at those contexts of where they're seeing that in other classes, or what that might look like in terms of those data sheets, because of course, when we're talking about humans, our safety data sheets are really kind of complicated in a very different way. I'll flick over to the next one, Jess, and drill down a little bit more then on what will you notice that's different. So obviously the book picks up on all the new terminology. So things like the word operationalize is gone. I really liked the addition of controlled variables. Isn't it interesting? We talk around independent, dependent, extraneous, confounding. They're all still there. All your old favorites are back for more. But this idea of what we actually then control in a study. So there's some of that new terminology incorporated. The scientific poster or the written requirements don't have a vast amount of changes. I think it's a really nice addition to see the difference between methodology and method. I think there's some ironing out in language there still to go as we continue, I think, as staff to bring this to life, as teachers to bring this to life. But looking at that method section actually as a methodology, what is adopted, and then the method in terms of how it's used. There's a really big section, and probably if you've got it in front of you and you're flicking through it as we talk, after those key science skills, you'll see about 8 to 12 dot points on different forms of error. So some of the different areas of uncertainty or what an outlier is, but it also drills down to categorizing errors. So what's a systematic error? Something that happens every time we produce this data, and how would we address that? What's a personal error, which essentially could be linked to the experimenter effect? I forgot what my third one was I was going to tonight. What's a random error? No wonder I forgot it. It's a bit random in itself. What's a random error? Something that happens. It's not really to do with a participant. It's not really to do with a systematic problem, but it's just occurred as a once-off. So it drills down into the type of errors that are there. And while I'm talking about what's new, what else have I noticed isn't there? There's not a lot gone. It doesn't actually reference experimental research designs. So our match participant independent groups, repeated measures, it doesn't reference those three directly. However, with a greater emphasis on methodology, they're the best methodologies that I can think of to talk about in terms of an experiment. What else happens, or what else is new? There's more detail around applying ethical guidelines. So yes, it has the NHMRC standards. It has the other ethics that we know really well, but really around that application and what that means in human experimentation. And I've already mentioned the expansion of methodologies. So, if you're looking at the old resources you have in front of you, I'm not sure there's a lot to throw out. I'd remove this idea of operationalizing, but that's probably something we've been tending towards for the last few years anyway. There's a little bit, as I said, new work in adding things around error, bias. Certainly those data and statistical measures are there, and we haven't seen inferential statistics creep back in with any p-values or statistical significance. So I think there's a lot of familiarity. I think it's in the unpacking and bringing to life of it, and there's probably, a good new 10 kind of pieces of further detail. And this idea, which I think is really interesting when they talk about how research methods applies to people, they ask us to teach it through a lens of kind of social, political, legal frameworks. Now, that as a dot point alone can feel a bit frightening, like how many examples do we need? But actually, again, very simply taught through any opinions in relation to, vaccine mandates or lockdown requirements. When Victoria was told to lock down, and we looked at their opinions data, what was informing those opinions? Was it their social situation, or who else they had to look after, or who else they knew that was impacted or sick? Politically, why was it done? Was it all around a look of control or an imbalance of power between federal and state? Like, there's some just really meaty stuff, I think, at the moment to look at that lens. And I certainly don't think it should be a standalone topic. All right, moving along. So that's probably, I guess, a bit of my summary on some of the research methods content. How can you then use this resource? And I'll talk also about the teaching. This can be, as I said, feet up on the table kind of a resource. It can be completely student directed, and it can be obviously self-paced. One of the things I love the most, and still use this workbook absolutely to this day too, is because I only teach 3-4. When I inherit my 3-4 class, and those first kind of 2 weeks of me working out how much am I reteaching, how much am I not reteaching, you kind of sit there with the class and you get to say, who's strong on this, 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 and this, and you get this, I learned for the test and I let go of it. And you just assign pages straight away. And for those students that haven't done any 1-2, like this is just the best book for them to do over that summer holidays to start getting the concepts. And then when you bring them together for your teaching, we're all coming in with at least a 70%. I think my book's more like 100%, but let's pretend the students didn't use it with all their energy. Everyone's coming in with then that kind of 70% of knowledge, and your time is spent being the magician. Yeah, a bit more of that. Watch that word. Who had another example, instead of writing the word independent variable on the board and starting from the start. Yeah, so I think this workbook provides that really rewarding teaching where you're completely controlling the room and not just doing the building blocks. Obviously, I think there are scenarios in here that can be great points of discussion. So hopefully I have worked with some of those themes for you so that you don't have to be the bad guy that brought up some of those negative things. I also, refer to one of my favorite things. I've been doing some year 9 teaching as well over the last few years, and have designed a unit on 3 Identical Strangers. Please tell me you have all watched 3 Identical Strangers. Just the most fantastic documentary about triplets separated at birth and what we come to uncover about their story, their differences, the ethics, the data. It's such an amazing unit for a like for a year 9, year 10 course to just design stuff around it. But I reference that study in this book too, because it is topical. And I think that, in these students' lifetimes, we're going to find out the answers that maybe we won't see in our lifetime. I think some of the other themes that, we really pick up on, I guess, throughout are any of those other references to kind of those, the modern day things. At the moment, did you see last week, there were 2 great articles, one around the incidence of neurons that are involved when you make a mistake. So where are these neurons that actually work out how we learn from a mistake? And there was another article last week about twins separated in South Korea and the differences in their intelligence. So, I love finding those little things and bringing them into the classroom. But hopefully there's some content within here that you can pick up on as well. It also can be used as straight homework tasks too. So I have just been asked a question in the Q&A. I feel like I'm doing a talk show. Are there example or model answers if the students want to correct as they work through the workbook? Yes, there are. So it also has, because there's absolutely no point. Isn't it funny how much students, even something as simple as IB and DB, and they're really confident they've got it, and then you read it and you're like, no, it's the other way. So the book also comes with all answers completely done in the best structure that I believe exists. There's also practice exam questions at the end of the book too. So some really hefty scenario-based questions too, of which I give a full marking guide. So it's just a gift for you, everybody, so you can reclaim some lovely time back. Which I should mention, the other thing that I thought I'd mention tonight, have you seen, the other one you've got to tell me you've seen, have you seen 100 Humans? It's on Netflix. I said to my class the other day, I only found it earlier this year. And I said to my class the other day, have you watched? I said something like that. Anyway, they'd all been watching the sci-fi one, and I was so impressed at how much they had been watching. 100. When I said 100 Humans, they all thought I meant the 100, and my whole class was like, yeah, we're watching. And I was like, wow, you guys are dedicated. We were talking about 2 different shows. 100 Humans on Netflix is a series. Oh, yes, thank you. People are saying it is fantastic. Yes, it is. And you will never troll YouTube for good psych research again. And in fact, you will get hours back in your life. One episode compares males and females' abilities, to in their perceptions of old age, or it compares different age groups' attractiveness, it does so many kind of amazing kind of little psych experiments. And again, for research methods, just grab any and go. All right, let me just check my chat. Oh yeah, halo effect is unreal. There's this really cool piece with a guy and a girl that drive up in a fancy car and say they're both doctors, and then you have to decide how intelligent you think they are. It's very cool, very easy watching, and you'll love it. All right, let me get back on track. Well, no, actually, that was on track. It was my resources section. 100 Humans, 3 Identical Strangers, and a couple of articles that were out just last week, which very happy to provide references for if we need. All right, so let's talk though. This is the content, and this is an awesome forum to share what we've got, and hoping this book makes that easier too for you. But let's talk about us as teachers. And I am back in the 3-4 classroom this year after many, many years out. And so I'm sitting here right now, just like you, juggling, how do we get through content? How do we get through content with enormous amounts of absenteeism? Isn't that a joy? But also, what is the best way for me to be teaching this content and moving into next year as well? So as I said at the start, this area does represent 25% of the marks. And I can't tell you how many times as an assessor, students would see a research methods term and just leave it blank. So getting your students to the point of confidence in attempting, or as I said, I was speaking to our year 10s today, doing a little exam skills sessions with them. I said, if the only thing you do on exam day is have in your head, look what I can do. Look what I can do. If you can approach it by saying, look what I can do. I don't quite understand the whole premise, but I can do this. Getting students confident with research methods and getting that mantra in their head is so important. And I think highlighting that importance to them is really valuable too. So if you've heard me speak at any CDES conferences over many, many years, you'll know that I have played with the way I have taught this course. And essentially there are two approaches according to me. Chunk it and do it all together and then piggyback off it for a year, or break it down and incorporate it. So now you've tuned in, let's give this headspace, let's give 5 minutes to these two different headspaces and think about what might work best for you and your students and your school setting. So our first one, chunked. Oh, Jess, I thought you'd left me to download 100 Humans. I wouldn't have blamed you if you did. All right, chunked is what I went with this year. A burst at the start of a program, and really great for early startup. So we have a 2-week early startup program at the end of last year to start. And I absolutely love using early startup for this. Some people will sit there and say, what an awful way I will lose enrollments from my class. But that's about the content you provide and how you link it to them. So I actually think it's an awesome one. I also think it's a great confidence booster for those students who've done one too, that they see some familiarity and they go, hey, I'm starting to break the back of this. And for those newer students, it allows you to set some things and then roll with that homework, okay, by using that book. So I love the burst. Again, if you're going to do the burst, please don't be Ferris Bueller and, anyone, independent variable, no, move on. Really get them doing tangible and practical activities. I'm sure you've all used, an M&M sampling thing where we, open M&M packets and we predict what percentage of the sample are blue, and then the sample gets bigger. And how good was our prediction? Oh, isn't our prediction becoming more accurate? I love working with year 12s who are like, how do you calculate a percentage again? And you're like, whoa. So, those practical activities, take them outside and just get them to shoot hoops, break them into 2 groups, and do a match participants design just on height. Line up in heights, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, shoot, who was the best? Group A, great. Create any variable that you want to, because you've got a match participants design. Ask one group to shoot going backwards, ask one group to turn in a circle and shoot. Psychology does not have to be present in your research. In fact, doing things that are quick and easy and provoke that thinking, is really, really great. I've already spoken a little bit about COVID and vaccine scenarios on top of 100 Humans. Just Google any Brainiac episode. I love using Brainiac for IVs and DVs. And look, I did used to teach boys and now I teach all girls, and maybe I need some new clips because I use, which food produces the smelliest fart. I use a range of different things that, just kind of get them giggling, but really they're really involved in. This year I've got a lot of, year 11s and year 12s in the class. And so I loved pitting them against each other and watching the year 12s moan about how the year 11s have so much more time and, just getting them conversational. And then, you know, what I think is the biggest advantage of Chunked, what I'm doing at the moment is every time I've done a part of the course, I then find a past VCAR question, which you'll see has parts of classical conditioning and ethics and sampling embedded in it. And that question is out on their table. And therefore that chunked work is being revisited and revisited and revisited and revisited as the year goes on. So I think the best thing with chunked is you just keep coming back to it when you see a new article, when we hear something else happen, or every time you get to that area of the course, find one of those VCAR questions. They're everywhere. That is something on the content you're doing now with a bit of research, and slap it in front of them and you're building and building and building. So that's the chunked variety. Let's have a look at the other one. All right, so I have also done this one as well when I was teaching 4 classes at the time. And so maybe it was my own little experiment. And I was trying to see if it was like the research method sneak up approach. I was trying to see how this worked for them. And I really enjoyed doing it, but probably as a teacher who's a little more time poor at the moment, the chunked for me, I felt like I knew where I was up to a lot more, but I really enjoyed this approach. So I have taught this in an incorporated manner before, which basically at the start of the year involves me. You could just use the pages of the workbook. You don't even need to use the dot points and say, right, I'm going to teach hypotheses here. I'm going to teach sampling here. I'm going to do this here. And you just go match, 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 match. So you match a dot point that you're doing already and add a research methods section to it. So just some really simple ones I was thinking about at the moment, you know, when you're doing neurotransmitters and the presence of, you know, what happens with dopamine, we really get a dopamine focus in the new study design too, which is fun. Dopamine or glutamate, actually using IVs and DVs there. What would happen in someone with Parkinson's who was given some L-DOPA or that dopamine, you know, burst, versus someone who didn't? What's the IV? What's the DV? So very easy to incorporate. I love when we're talking about stress, the use of subjective and objective data. And things that are really simple, like little Albert and ethics. So all it takes to do that, I think, is to align those pages of the workbook to different dot points. The one thing I will say that's really important is when you're doing the kind of notes or the theory, I think they need to sit in a different workbook. So whether that's the back of the book, turn it upside down and away you go. So kind of chunking that knowledge. I think one of the biggest pluses to this is a much more seamless integration into the way into exams. The exams don't just have a research method section, right? So everything is integrated. So the people who are writing the exam are integrating it in the way it most makes sense. You are integrating it in the way it most makes sense. I think if you can lean into this method, you really get a very authentic look at how the skills will apply. I really do believe in the new study design, this approach will work, if not better than the past, because of the look at different political influences, social influences, etc. So I think if you're going to start redesigning, ready for next year, this is also worth a go to. I've got something that said final thoughts, but let me just kind of flick to the chat on some things. I think 3 Identical Strangers and Someone Can Help Me is on Netflix or Stan. I think it's Netflix. I think it wasn't on Netflix and then it was. I certainly know I have kind of watched it on just on the go. ClickView, iView. It's everywhere. It's at JB Hi-Fi on a DVD, but I don't know if anyone has DVD players anymore. Okay, good. People know it's there. 100 Humans is definitely on Netflix. Yes, good question as well. Oh, sorry, we're supposed to be using the Q&A for questions. I know. Sorry, I'll behave myself as a presenter. Within subjects, between subjects, yes, they are all referenced in the study design. So yes, they are absolutely the same thing. They just are not using that exact terminology. Although we need to remember, everybody, that study designs, even after publication, do change. There are variations. So is that a variation I think we'll see? I think it is. Just a couple in here too. Thoughts on the Indigenous perspectives? Yes, let me leave that question until I finish the research methods section. And Maria, what a topical question for you to ask me today around experiments that do with gender versus sex, etc. I've had a busy 48 hours actually on unexpected media after I made some comments last. Just completely side topic. After I made some comments about the fact that, you know, we have many gender diverse students, non-binary students in our school, and that I refer to them in the way they are most comfortable. That message somehow got twisted by the Herald Sun to say that Toorak College now doesn't call any students ladies or girls, which is completely untrue. And I found myself on 3AW last night defending it as well. You know, it's really interesting. One of my points on the radio last night I made is that teachers have forever been responding to what they see in front of them. And if you've got a student going through a breakup, you don't use examples about breakups. And while we as psych teachers are teaching anxiety, and we know we've got 3 kids in front of us that are struggling with anxiety, we're really careful with our language. Well, so too am I careful with my gender diverse students or my non-binary students as well. That seems apparently to be newsworthy. I think that's just really not newsworthy. I think that's just great teaching. And I think you all know your context and your schools really well. All right, let me do final thoughts and then I will flick back to questions because we are getting a couple around, yes, match participants has gone from the new study design. Thank you. And so whether or not we will see that reappear, I think is really interesting. My final thoughts, and then I'll come back to Q&A. Firstly, as I said at the start, research methods is so much about building your students' confidence. This is about knowing they can tackle this. This isn't a big world of big scary terminology. It's what they're living every day. So break that language down and really build that confidence. One of the things I can see some people I've worked with in the past on the chat today. One of the things I've always worked with the colleagues I've taught psychology with is the use of what we call social plagiarism. When you do a research method scenario, often the aim, the IV, the DV, the results are right there in the scenario. You've just got to find it. Getting your students to know they don't need to recreate or reinvent the wheel here. They're not here to show their creativity. They are here to apply the principles. So getting them to never be afraid to find the relevant information and apply it and not have to add any flair to it. You know, one of the things I think that's trickiest and what you really need to do in your teams in the school is how do we approach this with 1-2 versus 3-4? I think, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but, you know, we've got to know everything by 3-4. So what's important in 1-2 to get some fundamental basics in so that the 3-4 teachers' lives can be freed up by having those building blocks in. So I think about in teams, where are the things that are really critical to hit at 1-2 so that 3-4 can build and that we're not starting from scratch, but nor are you spending a majority of your 1-2 year covering off research methods in such extensive detail that they never want to return to the subject again. And as I said, you know, I think one of the things I believe, I love teaching. I come to life in a classroom and I always think about what are the things that students can do to build knowledge so that I can do the teaching, which is the examples, which is the integrating, which is the scaffolding, which is the confidence building. So anything you can do to get them doing that independent building blocks so that you can do the teaching, you know, is absolutely the way to take a load off, and research methods and this resource will help you to do that. All right, I think that's it from me, and I'm handing over to you, Anne-Marie, but I will stay right here for me to go through any other questions as well.
Hi, Kristy. Thank you so much for that. I so enjoyed that presentation, as I'm sure you all have. Such a passionate and informative presentation. And thank you for topping up all my Netflix viewing options. That was really terrific. So today I'm Anne-Marie Mosley. I'm Senior Learning Consultant at Nelson, and I'm very proud to present the series of VICscience Psychology to schools. Our expert writing team have delivered comprehensive coverage of the study design, and I'm just going to take you through very briefly the suite of options that are available to you. So we've got research methods. There's nothing more to say in that regard. It's all been said. This resource is available to you at $28.95. We've got Nelson VICscience Psychology student books. So the student VICscience products are available as blended print and digital products, or as digital only with Nelson Mindtap. There are a few different options open to you depending on the needs of your learners. So the student book and the Nelson Mindtap student resources are $89.95. The digital only is $49.95. And the student book and the workbook pack is $99.95. And that represents a saving of $22.95. Jess, if we can move over to the next slide. So then we've got the workbook. So again, the workbook is all around practical activity. We've got exam questions, lots of practice, exemplar answers, and the answers in the back of the book. That is available to you at $32.95 for both Unit 1 and 3 and 4. And if we move on to the psychology study notes, so the A+ series. So achieve exam success with A+. Help your students be exam ready. So you have both the study notes and the practice exams that are available at $34.95. Thank you, Jess. And I'd just like to say a word regarding Nelson Mindtap. So Nelson Mindtap is the online learning portal for all things digital. Everything will be accessible in one place to help you engage and manage progress. The ebook will be there, interactives and assessment. And lastly, I'm just going to introduce the team. So the learning consultants in Victoria are myself, Kim Lowe, Gillian Lim, and we are here to support you make the best decisions for your learners in your school. We will be sharing information with you, including sample chapters, proofs, invitations to events such as today, helping you with having a good look through and a good deep dive into the resources. We're very happy to be flexible. We know that there's a lot going on in schools at the moment, so we're happy for short meetings, be it in person or on Zoom, whatever's convenient for you. So on that note, thank you very much. And I guess I'll hand over to Jess if there's any questions.
Jess, do you want me to hit a couple of the psych questions while you hit some of the...
Yeah, sorry, I was just answering one of the more practical questions.
I can see. Would you like me to hit psych ones?
You can take the psych ones, you're good.
You're sure? But maybe my session was informative enough that you can take the psych ones now. Now let me give it a go because I love talking about it. First question that is in our chat here, just in regards to what my thoughts are on the removal of the term convenience sampling, and is it one of those things that you think could come back in an amendment? I've got obviously no insight at all into the amendment. However, I've always been one of those teachers that probably thinks not just about the terms, but the wider application. One of those things that I guess can be, I don't know, beneficial and frustrating for my students with me as a teacher. And I think that if I were teaching random sampling or stratified sampling, and I had to talk about the advantages of those measures, I need a point of reference for comparison. So continuing to think as a teacher about how I provide that, I have written about convenience sampling in the workbook because I think it allows you to actually answer other questions on strength of sampling techniques. So anywhere in the book, you may think in some of the resources I produce that I'm a bit like, I often get this feedback, it's not on the study design. I'm like, its brother is on the study design, and wouldn't it be nice to know about it? So I certainly over teach rather than under in those resources, and things like convenience sampling are there. Karen, the question you asked earlier around the thoughts on the Indigenous perspectives in the new study design, this is something that we've been doing a lot of consultation on, and I think, you know, the team here assembled tonight, I think, are really aware of the sensitivities and difficulties. The couple of things I will say, because I don't think, you know, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. The first thing I think is really difficult in this is that we've also got a variety of answers or variety of perspectives on the content. So such as song lines and memory trails, you know, there are actually different parts or different areas of those cultures that believe quite different things. So this is one of the things we're trying to work at the moment, is how do we authentically gather the voices, because our students are going to want some definitive answers in a space where definitive answers may actually not be present. Now, I was talking to somebody who's doing this in biology at the moment. We were discussing whether psych or bio had it easier in teaching these perspectives. And although I always like to say we've got the hardest job in the school, I actually think in this case that in psychology, we've already been dealing with this area of grey, and we lean into the area of individualization. So we don't always sit there and talk about anxiety is this and phobias are this, and this is exactly how memory happens. So I think we just need to remember that our role is as educators. And when we are educating, we are providing perspectives and stories. And I can assure you that all of the resources that you will see here have considered those perspectives. I think what we're going to have to do is work with our students in relation to how they take this content on board. And I can tell you, oh gosh, what is the book I'm reading at the moment at home? It's called Memory Something, and it's got a blue cover, and I couldn't tell you what it is right now, but there's just some beautiful stories around the most fantastic old memory techniques, and it seems a shame to have not got our own culture's memory techniques embedded in the teaching we're doing. So I think the content, actually, the more I've read about it, the more interesting it is. I think it will be a delicate balance to examine that content. But yeah, I think the students are really going to engage beautifully with it. Okay. I think that comes to the end of the questions. Is that right? The research book is completely written, I can tell you that.
Does anyone have any last minute questions before we finish up for the evening? Just to let everyone know, Kristy's book, well, it's finished for Kristy. It is still in production stages, but we will have samples to show very, very soon. So you will see it. We will send it out very soon so everyone can have a look.
Oh, big thank you from me tonight, everybody. I think one of the things that's the best thing about the Psych community is the way we continue to share together. And I think, you know, navigating new study designs, as I can tell you throughout the rest of the study design, if you haven't had a good chance to look at it, there is so much familiarity. There is so much stuff that you know and love in the course. It really does lean into some really cool biological things. I think that add meat and meaning to what we're teaching, but it also really expands on things that I think students will find really interesting. So I can assure you, you know, hold on to about a good 95% of what you're already doing. They won't be major changes for us, and I think that's what's so important about the fine details in what is different, and using all those resources that are available to do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristy. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you've got a lot out of it, and we will be sharing the recording in case you missed a TV show that you need to watch or another detail that you need to keep up with and go back and check. And please feel free to share it with any of your colleagues who weren't able to join us. Thank you, and hope you have a great night.